Well, the CDC is now pushing back after a health expert told me the U.S. isn't acting fast enough to contain the bird flu outbreak in wild birds, poultry, and dairy cattle. Former COVID response chief Dr. Deborah Birx told me this on Friday.
We're not testing enough, and we know from other viruses that a lot of the spread can be asymptomatic. So we're kind of have our head in the sand about how widespread this is from the zoonotic standpoint, from the animal to human standpoint. I flash back to January of 2020, and I'm hearing the same words come out of the CDC.
Like what?
Low risk of human to human transmission.
Now
our agencies are making the same mistakes they made with COVID.
Joining us now is the director of the CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis. Doctor, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, those are some strong words there from Dr. Birx. What is your response to her comments about the need for more testing of the bird flu?
So first, thank you so much for having me on. Happy New Year, everybody. So I'll start by saying a really important point, which is flu is not COVID. I think COVID, as an example, was a virus that we'd never encountered. Flu is one that we've been preparing for decades, and bird flu specifically, we've been preparing for over 2 decades. So quite notably, we have been doing a lot of surveillance and testing of influenza, especially since March. So our routine influenza system, that is what we use every year to figure out what the best vaccine is and what the best strategies are for flu, has in fact tested 73,000 people to look for bird flu and has actually found 3 individuals through that system. So along with the work that we do in our regular surveillance, testing tens of thousands of people since March, we also have been engaging with farm workers and farm worker health organizations to make sure that individuals with exposures are tested. So we know that that is the highest yield for identifying individuals infected with bird flu. So I think bottom line is that we've been doing both industrial strength work, looking at surveillance, making sure that we're getting a sense of what's happening across the country using our flu surveillance system, but also working on the ground with our state public health departments to make sure that we're testing individuals with exposure.
Well, what do you say to what she said? And I see your point about, you know, this bird flu is different from COVID. We've been preparing for this. That she's hearing a lot of the same words that she heard with COVID, like it's low risk, you know, early on. That's what they were saying. And the CDC website still says bird flu is low risk to public health. What do you say to that? And do you believe it's still low risk?
So to be clear, we say on our website that bird flu is low risk to the general population. So every time we identify a case of bird flu, we go through an entire process to really look at our risk assessment. So we look at the story, the epidemiology around that case. Is there any evidence of human-to-human transmission? And to be clear, there is no evidence of human-to-human transmission in the United States at this time. We also look really carefully at the sequence related to influenza to make sure that we see if there is any change that could potentially mean that the virus is changing in a way that could mean that it's higher risk to humans. And I think that's been really important in the work that we've been doing and will continue to do. So I think based on our, looking at the risk every day, looking at what we're learning from the virus as well as the epidemiology, that remains true, that it is low risk for the general population. With that said, there is increased risk for individuals who have exposure to animal products. So that's why so much of the work that we're doing is focused on farm workers and others who may have exposure to birds or other products that may put them at risk for H5. And we do that by doing the work that we're doing with testing, but also making clear guidance around how people can protect themselves with personal protective equipment, as well as antivirals in terms of post-exposure prophylaxis, so using medications after an exposure to prevent potential acquisition of bird flu.
All right, so there's this, there's a couple scenarios here, right? You have the Louisiana case where there was a mutation that was detected, and then you have the potential scenario of someone, a farm worker, for example, getting the flu, the seasonal flu, and also getting bird flu, and sort of the concoction of both of those leading to it being transmissible to a human potentially. How concerning is this? Do you think it's just a matter of time until it starts mutating to infect human to human?
Yeah, I'll start by saying we're approaching influenza as we always do, with great humility. Influenza is a virus that can change, and I think that the Louisiana case is a great example. So in that circumstance, we have an individual who is infected by a virus, and as that virus replicates, it can actually acquire changes, and it has done that. Importantly, those changes did not transmit beyond that person. So though we've seen those changes, they may not be enough to be what sort of generates an increased assessment of risk. Another important piece is that we work really closely with our colleagues at USDA. And when looking at the birds in that individual's backyard, we didn't see those changes. So the bottom line is that the work that we do every day to make sure that we understand what's happening with the virus, as well as the epidemiology, is really what helps us make that risk assessment. And like I said, we really approach this virus and with this situation with great humility, but also approach it with decades of experience in dealing with influenza.
What are the risks associated with every human case that develops?
Yeah, so I think that when we look at each case, we look at exposure. Did they have a known exposure? What was that exposure? Is there any evidence for human to human transmission? And we're definitely not seeing that. And is there any increase in the severity? So we really look at all of these together to help guide our public health response. And a lot of what we're seeing now is telling us, be prepared. And so we've done that by making sure that testing is available through our public health labs, but also through 2 large commercial companies that allow physicians and other healthcare providers to order tests in their practice from their offices. So that's something that I think potentially didn't come through in some of comments from some of my colleagues, that in fact, we do have commercial testing available for H5 available today. And in fact, it's been available since the early fall. I think the other part of this is that we are avidly making sure that we are prepared in the circumstance that we need to move from being prepared for a vaccine program to moving to a vaccine program. And so the work that we do every day to categorize influenza viruses has been really important, because that's how we generate candidate vaccine viruses, which are the ones that we're developing with our colleagues in ASPR in the event that we need to go from planning and preparedness to implementing a vaccine.
All right, Dr. Daskalakis, thank you so much for your time.